Welcome back. AT&T and Time Warner taking on the Department of Justice. The two sides are now fighting over when the antitrust trial should begin. This comes after AT&T extended its deadline to complete the $85 billion acquisition to next year in April. Joining me now is the former CEO of Verizon Wireless, Denny Strigl. Denny, it's good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks so much for joining us. So what do you make of the DOJ's attempt to block this mega merger between AT&T and Time Warner?
Well, first of all, I think that it shouldn't have been done. They shouldn't attempt to block this. Comcast, NBC Universal, just in 2011, that deal was approved, by the way, with a behavioral agreement that said that Comcast would act in certain ways. But in this case, the Department of Justice would like a structural agreement. It makes no sense to me. Maria, if you look at vertical integrations, which this is one of, this is not two companies that compete that are coming together here.
Right.
There has not been, to my way of thinking, I don't know in the last 40 years that the Department of Justice has ever blocked a vertical merger. Why this one?
Well, I guess one of the things to look at is how vertical is it, with everything changing the way it is, right? I mean, is Facebook a media company? You know, is AT&T just a telecom company? I mean, today you've got all of these companies trying to get at the same consumer, isn't that right?
Well, they're trying to get at the same consumer for video streaming. This is the future of telecommunications. If you look at what Verizon does, what AT&T does, they're all trying to do that. And by the way, Facebook, Apple, and Google are trying to do the same thing.
And Amazon.
And Amazon. When you look at those giants, why is the Department of Justice singling out AT&T on a vertical, potentially a vertical integration?
So you don't think that the DOJ's argument here is viable? Do you think ultimately these two companies will be allowed to merge?
I think ultimately they will be allowed to merge. I also think...
And you're right to bring up Comcast, because there was questions about Comcast, but the DOJ then let that happen.
Maria, I'm holding out hope that there will still be a settlement that will be reached prior to the beginning of this trial.
Yep.
I mean, now we're even arguing about when does the trial begin.
I know. Let me ask you about what's going on in this industry. I mean, you've got Verizon, Amazon, Comcast, Disney now eyeing the assets of our parent company, 21st Century Fox, for possible purchase. Verizon could become a streaming giant in a deal with Fox as well.
Well, this is the future for wireless communications. AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, Verizon, they're all trying to put video, media content over their wireless devices. So that's where the future is. Now, Verizon has purchased AOL, as we know, has purchased Yahoo, and they're trying to put the pieces together to be able to provide streaming video. And you're right, we're all fighting for the same customers.
Well, you know, years ago when we were all watching the beginning of this, the lines being laid underneath the ground, there was all this expectation that, you know, we needed all of this, and then the demand wasn't there. So are we now talking about a similar sort of deja vu moment when we're all expecting all this stuff to happen and streaming, and yet maybe at the end of the day we don't see the... Because you remember what happened in the 90s.
I remember. I was there.
So was I.
I remember what happened in the 90s, but look what happened by the turn of the century.
Yes.
In the year 2000, this was a huge business. Starting in 1983 all the way to 2000, it was very slow to start, but then pricing came down. The service became more available, more affordable. The same thing will happen with streaming video over wireless.
So today, the content players content is king once again, but also the distributors are necessary with the streaming. So who wins in this?
That's a very good question. I guess we'll wait a few years and find out the answer to that. But as I think about it, the slow start to voice wireless was because the infrastructure was not built out. Back to your point, the wires, the towers, and so forth, they weren't there. And Verizon and AT&T have been spending, well, this year, AT&T is going to spend over $20 billion. Historically, and this year, Verizon has spent about $17 billion. When you think about the money being spent in this, the infrastructure is there. Now it's let's get the content providers.
Let's not forget what Amazon is spending on original content. Well, right? I mean, Amazon Prime, they're spending big dollars, billions of dollars to have new people creating original content.
But Maria, this is why the Department of Justice's suit against AT&T, in my way of thinking, I'm sorry, it's silly. It's silly.
We will be watching that, and you're not alone in that thinking, obviously. Denny, good to see you.
Good to see you,
Thanks
Maria.
so much for joining us. Denny Strigl there.